Tengen really went into God mode in order to protect his 6 moons. However, what would have happened if Sanemi went to the entertainment district to rescue Tengen's wives along with the Kamaboko squad? Of course, let's find out. Tengen, after recruiting the Kamaboko squad, is suddenly summoned by Kaguya along with the 3 musketeers. I mean Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke. They report to the headquarters and find Sanemi waiting for Kaguya. As soon as Tengen approaches Sanemi with his uplifting attitude, Kaguya arrives, and everyone bows in respect for the estranged brother of the king of pop. Kaguya announces that he has summoned them in order to inform them of territory changes and that Yoshiwara is no longer under Tengen's protection. Tengen is shocked. However, before he could interrupt the conversation, Kaguya continues and reveals that he had a vision in which Tengen died in the entertainment district. Thus, he has decided to give that area to Sanemi and send Tengen off on another mission to investigate a cult that's allegedly responsible for several missing women. Tengen tries to raise his concern over his missing wives. However, before he could lash out at Kaguya with his words, Sanemi interrupts him, stating that he ought to have some faith in his fellow Hashiras, as he's going to obliterate whichever demon is hiding in Yoshiwara. Tengen is concerned, however, he agrees with Kaguya's decision. In an attempt to win Tengen's trust, Sanemi begrudgingly agrees to take the Kamaboko squad with them, which is met with pretty mixed reactions by everyone. A few days pass, and the jolly going Hashira, the irritated, pine-headed Sanemi reaches the entertainment district along with Tanjiro and the others. Upon reaching the entertainment district, Sanemi immediately rushes to book an appointment with an entertainer. He immediately rushes to investigate the place. Sanemi, with his technical capabilities and keen intellect, comes to the conclusion that people actually don't like him, as he gets kicked out of multiple houses due to ill behavior. Zenitsu doesn't miss the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and suggests that they disguise themselves as customers and go visit the different houses. Thus begins the crusade of 3 boys with 3 fully grown and rather suspicious-looking mustaches. The investigation goes on for days, but the Kamaboko squad is unable to find a single clue as to what happened to Tengen's wife. However, suddenly, this all changes one day as the caretaker of the biggest house in Yoshiwara dies mysteriously, gathering unwanted attention. The Slayers surround the house and start their investigation. And on their very first day, they get their breakthrough with the help of Inosuke and Zenitsu. Inosuke pushes Zenitsu onto the floor in order to look out the window and stop him from staring daggers at the women outside. Zenitsu hits the floor infuriated. However, his expression soon changes as he hears some voices from beneath the ground. They inform Sanemi and Tanjiro, who immediately rush towards the scene. Sanemi, confirming the positing, punches a hole in the exact place where Zenitsu heard the voices, revealing a narrow tunnel. Tanjiro immediately remarks that the last time he saw a hole this big, he was still with his ex. Okay, I'm just kidding.
Or was I?
But before Tanjiro or anyone else could utter a single word, Inosuke starts dislocating his joints and jumps headfirst into the tunnel. Sanemi, fed up with the antics of the 3, starts aggressively digging and widening the tunnel. As they dig a bit, suddenly the ground below them collapses and all of them fall into a huge cave-like structure. As the dust from the crash settles, the Slayers' mouths drop to the floor as they lay eyes on a horrific scene. They notice that Inosuke is badly cut all over his body and smashed against the wall. Sanemi soon realizes that the threat could very likely be an upper moon. Suddenly, a cloth-like weapon attacks Sanemi out of nowhere, but he simply counters it by cutting it off in one sweep. The dust fully settles and Daki emerges out of the smoke with a sadistic smile on her face. Tanjiro grips his sword while Zenitsu struggles to hold his consciousness after glancing at a beautiful yet imminent threat to his life. Sanemi, realizing the situation, gives a concerned look to Tanjiro. He refocuses his attention on Daki, and as she lets loose another one of her cloth blades, he immediately triggers the Itaten Typhoon, severing all of her cloth blades. He then immediately plants his feet with a violent stomp and dashes towards the upper demon. Before Daki could even realize what had happened, the world starts to wobble as her head rolls towards the ground after a swift decapitation. Meanwhile, Tanjiro rushes towards Inosuke to rescue him and tend to his wounds. As Tanjiro closes in, Inosuke suddenly gets up and headbutts Tanjiro, thinking that he's the demon. Tanjiro gets knocked to the ground with his back on the floor and notices the ceiling of the cave with all the cloth hanging from it. As the blurriness fades from his eyes, he gets mortified upon pinpointing the images of people trapped in the cloth. He immediately unleashes the fire wheel and cuts everyone free. People start falling to the ground, and among them, they spot 3 women who fit the description Tengen gave of his wife. Sanemi, looking at the pitiful Daki, sheathes his sword. However, he's still underwhelmed by the power of the upper 6. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐽 tries to wake Zenitsu up, but realizes that he is in shock and not fully unconscious. Tanjiro asks the 3 women if one of them is Tengen's wife, and all 3 of them answer yes. Tanjiro gets flustered. However, a rather deep pain strikes the heart of Zenitsu after he hears the fact that Tengen has not 1, not 2, but 3 wives. This revelation deals a great deal of emotional damage to Zenitsu's conscience, and he passes out due to its effects. Sanemi starts walking away from Daki to check on the idiots he brought along with him. However, a shadowy figure suddenly dashes towards Sanemi behind his back. But before it could hit Sanemi, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐽 interrupts it by a tackle while taking a cut to his hand. Sanemi grips his sword and takes a close look at the new foe, who is revealed to be the true Upper Moon 6, Gyutaro. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐽's hand starts to turn blue, indicating he's been poisoned. Sanemi notices this and orders the rookies to fall back. Gyutaro curses Sanemi for beheading his sister and unleashes his blood demon art. Sanemi too initiates the first form, Dust Whirlwind Cutter, and both of them dash towards each other. As their attacks connect, a huge explosion engulfs the cave and it starts to collapse. Zenitsu immediately rises from his half-dead state and, at a blinding speed, carries some of the victims who were trapped in Daki's clothes to safety. A huge hole opens up in the middle of the entertainment district, engulfing the houses and destroying a quarter of the area. Sanemi realizes that if he gets cut by Gyutaro's blade, he's going to die of poisoning, so he decides to end the fight as quickly as possible. Daki attacks Tanjiro and ends up freeing Nezuko, who immediately starts attacking her. Zenitsu initiates his first form against Daki and drags her along the roofs of the houses, while Nezuko follows her in pursuit. Sanemi starts batting his head with Gyutaro and begins to understand his pattern of movements. He immediately starts counterattacking and lands a few cuts close to Gyutaro's neck. This enrages Gyutaro, and he starts to spam his attacks on Sanemi, forcing him to back up. Tanjiro hopelessly watches Sanemi and Gyutaro fight. However, he decides to help Sanemi and lend him a hand. Meanwhile, Zenitsu drags Daki all over Yoshiwara, but his legs finally cramp up, forcing him to stop. Daki once again starts her assault, stating that she's going to cut the Slayers into tiny pieces now that she has been freed, as she raises her cloth blades and aims them towards Zenitsu and Nezuko. However, before any of the attacks connect with an exhausted Zenitsu, they are intercepted by a rejuvenated 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐽, who reveals that he's immune to poison due to being brought up by the boars. The 3 Slayers' onslaught on Daki continues while Sanemi tries to break into Gyutaro's defenses. The guilt of not being helpful starts to weigh on Tanjiro. However, suddenly, the images of his siblings come rushing to his head, and he dashes to join Sanemi in a fight of rage. However, as soon as he closes in and swings his sword towards Gyutaro, the upper demon grins and swiftly deflects the attack. What happens next shocks Tanjiro to his very core as he realizes that he stabbed his own comrade, Sanemi, in the shoulder. Gyutaro tries to take advantage of the opening in order to cut both the Slayers' heads off simultaneously, but Sanemi instantly realizes the demon's intent and grabs Tanjiro. He then proceeds to kick the demon with both his feet, propelling him and Tanjiro backwards in order to create room between them. Sanemi pulls Tanjiro's blade out and a gush of blood comes rushing out of the wound. As the smell of Sanemi's Marechi blood spreads throughout the demolished war zone, the mouths of Gyutaro and Daki start watering. Daki, with her sadistic and selfish nature, commands her brother to get the Hashida's body for her. However, Gyutaro gets a little too drunk on the smell of Sanemi's blood and loses himself for a minute. Realizing that Gyutaro will probably gobble up the Hashira himself, Daki tries to rush in and sweep up Sanemi, leaving the trio of 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐽, Nezuko, and Zenitsu behind. Suddenly, Gyutaro snaps out of his bloodlust and immediately rushes towards Sanemi along with Daki. Having been cornered, Sanemi tries to use every ounce of his strength to counter the upcoming dual attack. However, before Daki could even reach Gyutaro, Nezuko catches up to her and kicks a hole in her stomach from behind, while Zenitsu chases her down using his first form, several folds over, mustering the remaining energy in his body. As Nezuko's blade closes in on Daki, she gets afraid that the yellow Pikachu might actually decapitate her. Sanemi too tries to turn the situation to his advantage and swings his blade to decapitate Gyutaro along with Daki, which he views as the only way to slay them. Zenitsu enters to Godspeed and swings his blade, while Sanemi too tries to thrust his blade onto an approaching Gyutaro's neck. Daki's head gets cut off by Zenitsu. However, Sanemi fails to get his blade all the way through Gyutaro's neck as he gets stabbed by Gyutaro's sickle. Sanemi and Gyutaro come to a standstill, with Sanemi taking the final breaths of his life. But suddenly, Tanjiro emerges out of the shadows and pushes Sanemi's sword with his own to fully decapitate the demon and end the siblings' crusade. Like if you want a part 2 and subscribe, otherwise Gyutaro will become your bride. Haha, see ya!